This material was recovered from an abandoned research cache along the Ucayali tributary, northern Peru. The reels were labeled simply Marrow Expenditure. The film stock is degraded, the audio partial. What follows has been reconstructed from fragments of tape, field notes, and a surviving diary. The events occurred during the wet season of 1979, when anthropologist Elias Marrow led a private expedition into what locals call the Shanai Timpishka, the boiling river. Marrow had spent 2 decades cataloging myths of rivers that speak. His journals describe an obsession with what he called audible geology, the idea that certain landscapes produce frequencies capable of influencing human thought. Funding came from the Royal Geographical Society and a private benefactor whose name was redacted from every record. On April 3rd, he and 3 assistants left Iquitos aboard a wooden launch called the Helena. Their stated goal to collect geothermal data. Their unstated motive, to verify a legend whispered by Ashaninka elders, a river that boiled not from heat, but from souls. The journey inland consumed 4 days. Notes mention humidity so dense it felt poured rather than breathed. Equipment corroded within hours. Compass needles drifted east, though the boat faced south. In Marrow's log for April 7th, he wrote, "The forest emits a pressure behind the eyes, as if thought itself sweats." From the deck, crewman Luis Guerra reported voices between the cicadas. Not words, but rhythms. He claimed the sound matched the pulse of the engine. That night, he refused to sleep below deck, insisting something in the river kept time with his heart. At Porto Nauta, Marrow met Father Ramirez, an aging Jesuit who begged him not to continue. The priest warned of vapors that take the shape of the unconfessed. Marrow dismissed him, yet purchased extra film and an additional thermometer. The following audio fragment, dated April 10th, was recorded beside the last inhabited settlement. Marrow's voice is clear. Temperature of river surface, 84 degrees Celsius. Steam visible for 150 meters. Locals refuse to approach after dusk. They say the river remembers names. 2 days later, the last messenger canoe returned from upriver, empty, save for a strip of film sealed in a glass jar. The emulsion showed only green light and moving water. By April 12th, the party established Camp 1. Recovered film shows Marrow erecting a weather station. The camera shakes, not from operator error, but a rhythmic vibration consistent with low-frequency sound. That night, an entry appears in his diary. "The jungle breathes, not metaphorically. I have timed the intervals." At 3:14 a.m., the temperature sensor failed. The barometer registered a pressure drop equating to a storm, yet no storm came. Instead, the tape captured a tone, almost a voice, layered beneath the river's hiss. Analysts describe it as human vowels without consonants. For the first time, Elias Marrow wrote the word listening in the margin, underlined twice. End of reel 1. The next recording begins 26 hours later. Marrow's voice is no longer alone. The second reel opens with laughter. 3 relaxed voices discussing breakfast. Then, distortion. On playback, analysts identified a secondary track, half an octave lower, containing no human phonemes. Within minutes, the microphone cuts, replaced by tape hiss. The interference repeats at precise intervals, 6 minutes, 41 seconds apart. Marrow's diary from April 13th reads, "Luis claims he saw movement beneath the river skin, shapes reflecting our own. At dusk, the forest stilled for exactly 60 heartbeats. Even the mosquitoes obeyed." A note in the margin says, "Record the silence, it has structure." It has. At 3:17 a.m. on April 14th, Luis Guerra initiated a distress call. Only the first 10 seconds survive. They're pouring through the canvas, heat like metal. The following morning, Marrow wrote that the camp had been ingested. Ant bodies were found fused to the instrument casing, their exoskeletons showing thermal damage, but there was no fire. Soil temperature remained constant. 3 days later, a canoe from a nearby village encountered Marrow's party from a distance. According to the elders, the foreigners had painted their faces with ash and stood motionless on the bank. When called to, they turned in unison and walked back into the trees. One witness described it as seeing a photograph stand up and breathe. By April 16th, 2 men remained, Elias Marrow and his assistant, Omar Farouk. They moved towards the main bend of the Shanai Timpishka. The final film segment shows them hauling equipment through waist-deep water, faces streaked with ash. Neither speaks. The microphone records something else. A single phrase in Quechua repeated every 20 seconds. He hears our steps. End of reel 2. When the next recording begins, the camera is half submerged. The voice on the tape is no longer Elias Marrow's alone. Reel 3 was discovered in a tin caked with river silt. The first 90 seconds are blank, then motion, a lens half submerged, water boiling. On the audio, Marrow's voice counting 31, 32, 33. The river answers. Analysts describe a countertone 33 Hz, subaudible, but recorded on the tape. When amplified, the tone forms a pattern indistinguishable from human respiration. From his diary, April 17th. The vapor moves opposite the wind. Omar refuses to speak. Says the steam repeats our breath. I hear vowels in the mist. His final full sentence that night reads, "It knows the rhythm of our blood." At 2:12 a.m., Omar transmitted on the same frequency as the earlier distress call. The logbook lists one word, return. This signal coincided with a seismic tremor recorded 300 kilometers away. The energy suggests the message propagated through the ground, not the air. Later, Marrow filmed the base of a massive ceiba tree. He speaks softly, describing faces in the bark, indentations aligned like features. A slow pan reveals 3 distinct impressions resembling the missing crew. Botanists later determined the tree was alive, yet its growth rings stopped that year. The next minute of footage is chaotic. Thermal bloom suggests ambient heat exceeding 90 degrees Celsius. Over this, Marrow repeats a phrase, "Not heat, hunger. It breathes through me." His temperature sensor fails at 96 degrees, yet no sign of combustion appears on film. The air, it seems, burned without flame. Within this audio, analysts isolated a secondary voice, female, speaking English backwards. Reversed and slowed, it forms a phrase, "He follows the sound of his own pulse." Omar Farouk's remains were never found. End of reel 3. The next sequence was spliced to an unrelated film from 1954. In it, Elias Marrow stands beside the boiling river, smiling. His mouth moves, but the tape carries only the river's hiss. The fourth and final reel shows 47 seconds of image before the lens pulses in and out of focus. Engineers confirm the optical variation corresponds to a 60 beat per minute rhythm, identical to Marrow's recorded pulse. Omar Farouk's assistant left one last note. He asks the river questions. It answers with mirrors. The reflection moves before we do. Moments after this, the handwriting devolves into looping spirals, identical to the glyphs Marrow had etched in his geological samples. The Marrow Expenditure remains one of the most perplexing cases of disappearance in modern anthropological history. The river and the jungle that guards it have kept their secrets. The story of Elias Marrow is a reminder that some mysteries are not meant to be solved, only witnessed. If you found this case as compelling as we did, please consider subscribing for more deep dives into the unknown. Stay curious and stay safe. Thank you for joining us